Hi, and welcome back to The Current. This is Chris Nafis, pastor of Living Water Church, and today, very fortunate to have Bishop Cornelius Bowser join me. Bishop Bowser is a former gang member who has turned his life to Christ and has given himself over to working against gang violence. He's the founder of Shaphat Ministries. He's the pastor of Charity Apostolic Church and is doing amazing work out in the community. You'll get to hear all about it in this episode. We had a great discussion. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Here it is. All right. Well, Bishop, thank you for joining me today. Really honored to have you on the show, and really grateful that you said yes. So, thank you.
Yeah, it's an honor to be a part, and thank you.
And so you're a pastor of a church down the street from us on Market Street, right? We're on 16th and Market. You guys are 32nd and Market?
Yes, on the corner of 32nd. The address is actually 3194 Market Street, but we're right there on the corner.
Okay, and then you run Shaphat Ministries, which is what I've been following you because you've been doing this work on kind of gang intervention and trying to make peace in the community.
Yes.
How'd you start doing that? How'd you get into the work?
Well, I got into the work because I'm a former gang member, and coming up in Southeast San Diego in the 70s and the 80s, from 74 to 84, I was gang banging from the age of 12 to 22. At the age of 22 and a half years old is when I turned my life over to Christ. And that's when I left the streets and left the gangs and so on. So I would say probably about a year after that is when I started getting involved in trying to help my friends who were also in the gang lifestyle to get out of the gangs. And my main objective was invite them to come to church. If they get saved, their life would change like mine did, And so that's what I was basically doing. I did that for some years, and I think it was 1992, I started a youth program called Let Us Make Man Outreach Services. And it was focused on gang prevention and intervention and drug prevention and intervention. And I did that from 92 to 95. And then in 1995, I started pastoring. And so I kind of merged everything to the church, but I was basically working in a silo, right? I really didn't want to have too much. I was isolationist, didn't want to have too much to do with the community. And I said, hey, if you come to church, come here. This is where God can help you, and so on. And I think around 2004, 2005 is when I kind of started. I said, I'm gonna get back involved in the community along with what I'm doing in the church. But I didn't really want to start another organization like I had with Let Us Make Men Outreach Services. It was my opinion that there were a lot of different organizations out there that need help, right? So I can go provide my services to one of the organizations out there. And a pastor friend of mine that I knew, his name is Bishop Joel Trout. He was the one pastor I was telling you about that. They actually had the Church of Nazarene, that building there on 40th and University. Yeah. And so he was the pastor then, but he was working for an organization called Metro. And I reached out to him and said, hey, I want to do some mentoring, right? And so I was doing some mentors with young men that was caught up in the gang lifestyle, working with them, helping them. And about going into it maybe 6 months to a year, I can't remember exactly how long. But what ended up happening is I had invited him to come to church. And he said, yeah, I'll come to church. And I didn't call him that Friday. I was going to call him that Friday to check in on him, make sure I see him on Sunday. And I didn't, right? And so then I called him on Monday to check in on him. He didn't answer the phone. And then about an hour later, Bishop Trout called me and told me that he got killed over the weekend. Yeah, so that really, really, because, then you blame yourself. Man, if I'd have called him Friday, that wouldn't have happened. And so that really knocked the wind out of me. And so I took a break about a year and a half. And I had a pastor friend of mine, Bishop Dwayne Shepherd. His church was on 20th and L Street. And he had an organization called Greater Works Empowerment Center. And he had a program that's called GIP, which is Gang Intervention Prevention. He knew that I had a program before because we all went to the same church. When my pastor died, he took over that church, Great Apostolic Faith Temple Church, which is the church I got saved at on 28th and L. So he asked me to come over to help his program. And I said, okay, I'll come over and help. And so when I was helping, I had to do a lot of outreach, right, for the program. And that's what kind of got me back involved in the community and so on. And I even told Pastor Shepherd, I said, look, man, I said, you need to have because there was this church program, but I was just helping them. I said, you need to have your people out in the community and so on, or they're going to think that I'm the face of GWIC, which I'm not, right? I'm just here to help you and so on. And I helped him out for about 2 years. And then we had some disagreement about some of the work that we were doing as far as with law enforcement and things like that. And so that's when I realized, like, man, maybe I just need to start my own organization, right? So that's when I started Shafat in 2012. And at the same time, I was co-founder of another organization called Community Assistance Support Team, which is CAS. Pastor Archie Robinson, Pastor Patty B, Pastor Sandoval, and we had some other pastors as a part of that, but they fell off. And so I was working with both organizations parallel. But Shafat was more so just in the church and working with the youth and doing things that I couldn't do through CAS. And I would say around 2014, 2015, I kind of slowly but surely kind of separating the work that I was doing with Shafat versus the work that I was doing with CAS, because CAS many times when I would do things, that wasn't the mission or the direction that they wanted to go. So I said, okay, let me focus on the ministry like God wants me to do. So then I can do it the way he wants me to do it. And so from there, that's when I really just kind of started doing Shafat outreach and still work with CAS, and still a part of CAS till today. But more so the focus has been with Shafat outreach. So it's a ministry of our church, Charity Apostolic Church. It's a ministry. And so our focus is gangs. One of the things that I discovered and stumbled upon is when you're trying to help these young men and young women, but most of the young men that we work with trapped in this gang lifestyle, you find out that there are a lot of underlying issues that they're dealing with. And so that's what kind of got me involved in the justice system and criminal justice reform, changing gang laws. That's what moved me to that. And basically it was just gang intervention and prevention. And then I hooked up, I think it was around 2015, I hooked up with a group called Moms Demand Action, and the Brady campaign was calling it at that time, and they formed an organization called San Diego for Gun Violence Prevention. But when I started working with them, their primary focus was on guns, which I was focused on that too, but I was more so looking at the gang situation. And what I realized is when I started working with them, and then I started looking at the gang situation, that most homicides, a gun was used. And so I realized, like, man, if we can really work on reducing gun violence, we can reduce the homicides, in San Diego. So that's where the focus kind of shifted from just dealing with gangs. We deal with gangs, but as it relates to guns, there was a study that was done by, I think, Jay College up there in Boston, David Kennedy. And one of the things that when they did their study, they found that what works is when they called it focused deterrence, right? And so I use some of that model of focused deterrence. Focused deterrence centers around working with the community, working with victims, working with perpetrators, but also working with the police, everybody working in their lanes. And they did what they call these call-ins. They identified the individuals who they believe are committing the violence in the community, because it's only a small percentage of individuals that's committing the violence in the community. They work with law enforcement, probation to identify these guys. They would call them in, and they would, give them, warning, like, hey, we know who you are, know what you're doing, and we want the violence to stop, right? If it don't stop, this is the consequence. We're going to lock you up. But on the other hand, we have a lot of resources over here to help you, right, if you do want to get out and so on. So they would have different programs there. They would have moms, dads who lost their loved ones. They have folks who were former gang members or just got out of prison, credible messengers, lived experience. Speak to them to convince them that, hey, we have support and help for you. Change your life. We can help you change your life. So with focused deterrence, they say you focus on a specific crime. And so that's what we do. So when I looked at gangs and I looked at gun violence, based on the Sandax report, and a couple reports came out that said that 100% of gang homicides, the weapon that was used was a gun. And so I said, okay, if we really want to be successful at trying to focus on a certain crime to tackle this gang violence, we have to focus on a specific crime. So our crime was guns and gun violence, and so that's why we more so deal with gun violence, even though we address any violence, whether it's a fight, knives, because all that could lead to gun violence, and we want to kind of deal with any type of gun violence, gang violence, whether it's fighting, knives, other type of weapons, or gun. We address it, but we know that most of the time it's guns that create most of the problems, and so that's where we try to keep our focus at. And so we started various programs to address that, and I can share that with you if you want, but I don't want to ramble on too much.
No, you're good. Well, because it probably escalates a lot, right? Like you might start out with just somebody getting jumped, and then they retaliate, and
exactly.
then, it gets up to gun violence. I mean, it sounds to me like you got I've followed you on Twitter, like I told you before, for a while, and I've seen some of the you guys have like months of peace that you kind of build, and you have all these strategies to try to, and you meet with some of the leaders of the gangs that are still like in the life,
yes.
and try to find ways for them to commit to peace for a season or commit to reconciling over one beef or another or whatever. And so it seems like you're kind of doing that, working on people that are still in it, but you're also kind of have this constant invitation for people to get out of it, right?
Right. Yeah.
And as downtown, we see this, we're working a lot with folks who are struggling with addiction and different forms of lifestyles that they can't seem to escape.
Right.
And as you kind of mentioned, and we know very well, like it's not, people I think outside sometimes just imagine, well, they just chose to start using and they just keep choosing to use, or they just chose to join a gang and that's what they want to do. But there's all these underlying factors.
Oh yes.
That are like social factors and economic factors and safety and fear and trauma and all those kinds of things.
Yes.
So like what are I'll start with asking this, like what are the barriers to somebody getting out of the life, and then maybe like how did you find your way out?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I guess those two would tie in as far as other people and myself. As far as myself, what happened with me is I was just curious about God and started reading the Bible on my own. And the more I read the scriptures, the more convicted I got, and the more when I went out and got high or was hanging out with my homies and we was doing illegal things, and I knew they was wrong because of reading the Bible. Yeah, I felt bad about it, and I used to like party all night and then park on the side of the road somewhere and pray and ask God to help me, and because I really wanted to change, because He had a hold on me. And what happened is one night I was praying to the Lord to help me, and I said, Lord, I can give up everything, right? I can give up the women, I give up the drugs, I give up all these things, but I can't give up the gang. I can't give up my homies. I can't give up what we would call my set. And that's the gang that I'm from. I can't give that up, right? Because I was so sold out to it, so committed to it. What we used to say back when I used to gang bang is I'm a do or die Crip, right? So I was in this for life. That's the way I looked at it. I would be in my rocking chair, 90 years old with a blue rag in my hand. That's how we used to talk when we were teenagers. And but my mindset, that was in my mind, and that was my thinking, I'm not giving this up. And I remember telling the Lord that I can't give that up, Lord. And right after I did that, I prayed to the Lord. I had to go do a little time. I got locked up for drugs, being under the influence of drugs. And so I think they gave me 6 months. I did 4.5 months out of that. And I got out. And when I got out, me and one of my friends, we went and to one of my other friend's house who sold drugs. And so we asked him, he was selling PCP, which is what we call Sherm. And we went over his house to ask him to smoke one with us, right? And he said, okay, meet me down on 30th Imperial. On 30th Imperial, I don't know if you're familiar with that area, but they have the corner Mudlands. And they have a building there that's called Logan Heights CDC across the street. That little area where the kids play in between those two buildings, that used to be an empty vacant lot. And that's where we used to meet and hang out, drink, and get high. So I met him there, my other friend. We met my homeboy there who had the drugs. He came and smoked one, got us high. I got high. I went and sat on some steps in apartments in between L Street and Imperial on 30th. I was sitting on some steps in apartments, and my friend came and said, let's get up out of here. T-Row's dead, and he was the one that smoked the PCP with us. Said he's dead. I said, no, that can't be, man. He just left us right now, right? And he said, I'm telling you, he's dead right now. Go down there and look if you want to see. So I said, no, I want to see, So I walked down on to Imperial, walked down close to 31st and Imperial, and there he was laying on the ground. He was, had his arm like that. So I don't know if he saw the shooter, but to my understanding, he got shot in the chest and he got shot in the head. And when I saw him, he was dead, right? And I had other friends that get nobody was there, no ambulance, no nothing yet. It had just happened, and so with me, God was dealing with me now, because I had friends that get killed before, and it didn't impact me like that. But when I went down and I saw him lying on the ground dead, I said, man, that could be me. That could be me down there dead. And, so some of my homeboys, they jumped in this car, and I thought, we were, because when your homeboy get killed, you're thinking it's the enemy. Hey, let's go get some revenge. And so I'm jumping in the car thinking we're going to go get revenge. And they go down the street and start smoking some more PCP. I got mad. I got out of the car like, man, the homie's dead and y'all getting high, and in my mind, though, I was like, if that was me down there dead, that's what they'll be doing. They'll go get high, wouldn't even care, right? So I left and I went to Memorial Park the next day. That's where a lot of the homies hang out at during the daytime. And there was a lot of them up there, I guess, because, T-Row got killed. And so as I was going into some of the circles, of listening to my homeboys talk, I started hearing them speak negative about T-Row, that they didn't care that he's glad that he's dead. And then I got in one circle as they was talking and found out that, it was one of the homeboys that did it. Oh, wow. Wow. Yeah, and that really impacted me, right? And so with God dealing with me, when I left Memorial Park that day, in my mind, it was already made up. I said, goodbye, world, and hello, Jesus. That's kind of the way when I left, I said, okay, I'm done with this. I see, Lord, what you're saying now. So I'm giving it up for you, because there's no loyalty and nothing but betrayal there. And so for me, the transformation, the change happened by turning to God, prayer, the word and scriptures and things like that. And you are kind of, I would say, especially when you're younger and you're thinking, you are trapped from the perspective of in your mindset. And because before then, I was always telling myself, I'm going to stop, right? Because back then, you have to remember, this was in 84. But even before then, when I think I was about 19 years old, I was like trying to get out of this lifestyle. And I ended up getting saved at 22 and a half. But from the age of 19 to the age of 22, I was going back and forth because I really wanted to get out of it, but I was always dragged back into it. And so that mindset keeps you trapped in that lifestyle, right? Because you think that you can't, this is who you are, right? And you can't leave the gang because you're committed to this. And even though you want to change, if you don't change your mindset, you're going to stay trapped in it. And so one of the things that we try to do is help these young men change their mindset. And we deal with them through cognitive behavioral therapy. And because we have lived experience and we've been through it ourselves, a lot of times we can win their respect that way. But a lot of it has to do with their mind, right? If we can change their mind. So that's why I try to reach them, because it is hard to get out, because these are people that a lot of times, the people that they're gangbanging with, they grew up together, right? Played in the sandbox together, ran the streets barefoot with snotty nose, playing with each other. The moms and grandmothers knew each other. And so these young men and young women, they have a real close-knit tie, right? Like family. And that's kind of the way you see the gang. It's like your family, right? And so that's kind of hard to walk away from. Even when you say, like, I'm done with the violent part, but this is still my homies and I'm still a gang member. Even when you do that, you still get dragged into it because somebody close to you, like what happened with T-Row, when something like that happened, you want to get revenge, And so a lot of times these young men, they go through a vicious cycle until something either real bad happens and it really wakes them up, or they go to prison and after 10 or 15 years in their mindset, and some never change, but some of them, they start thinking about that change, or they age out, right? They get about 31, 32 years old and they start aging out. But what I'm finding now is that that's even becoming, I don't want to say a rare thing, but a challenge to these young men, because even though they'll say, I don't gangbang no more, which gangbanging means you out there putting in work, you committing the violence, representing your set. If something happened, you the one that's going out there doing the violence against other gangs. When you say you're a gang member, you're like, well, yeah, I'm still a gang member, I'm still a part of all this, but I'm not doing the violence, right? And so a lot of times when they get a little older now, they say, well, I'm not a gangbanger, I'm just a gang member, but they still caught up and represent that lifestyle. And so it becomes hard for these young men to pull out. And back when I was coming up, we didn't have older people that was in their 30s and 40s to look to who had changed or got out of it, right? Because this was still new. And so the guys who started this was like either at that time when I got out was in their late 20s, right? And a lot of them was in prison and things like that. And so we didn't have no one to look to. Now they have a lot of people to look to who's been in it and out of it. The unfortunate thing of that is there's a lot of people, gang members, who are 50, 60, and even 70 years old and still represent that gang, right? And you cannot change as long as you're still a part of that gang culture, right? And so that's the challenge we see today. And so like what you was talking about with some of the work that we do, one of the things you were mentioning was the seasons, we call it Seasons of Peace through the No Shots Fired program. The Seasons of Peace is about picking a certain time span and calling for what we call ceasefire, but we don't use that term. We use fall back, right? Ask the gangs to fall back, give each other a pass, and don't commit violence against each other during that time. There's a gentleman, a Reverend Jeffrey Brown out of Boston. He started the Seasons of Peace. And the way it got started was he was out talking to the guys in the street that was involved in the gangs, trying to get a ceasefire, trying to get them not to commit violence against each other. And so one of the things when he was talking to them about that, they said, well, if you really want to do this and want to get a ceasefire, you have to go talk to the guys in jail, in the prison, because I guess they were the ones running the gangs in the streets. So he went and met with them, and he shared with them what he wanted to do. He said, what I want to do is from Thanksgiving through New Year's, I want there to be a ceasefire. And we're going to call that a Seasons of Peace, where you guys don't commit violence against each other. And he said, one of the gang members said, so let me get this straight. So if we go for this, do we start shooting on New Year's Day or on New Year's Eve or New Year's Day? He said, well, the ideal is to go after January 1st. I hope you don't shoot at all, but after January the 1st. And the same thing with Thanksgiving. On Thanksgiving it starts, not the night before, but at midnight. And so he had to split.
Pushing that Black Friday earlier.
Exactly. And he said by the time he got to the streets, the word was already out. And he said they went I guess during that time there was a lot of violence in Boston. And he said they went 21 days without a shooting and so forth. And so that's where I got the concept, no shots fired. Yeah. Because I went to Chicago, he presented the Season of Peace there. But then he came to San Diego, met with me because I told him I wanted to start it here. And one of the things he was saying about the Season of Peace is that during this time, we want no shots fired. And I kind of picked that up, and I like that concept, no shots fired. So that's why we started the No Shots Fired program, centered around the Seasons of Peace, which we'll have like 3 times a year. So what we'll do is spring, we'll pick a time when all the schools start getting out, when the first schools start getting out, and when the last school go back to school. So a lot of time it covers for a month, maybe the whole month of March. And then we do the summer, right? For the past couple of summers, we've been doing July 4th through Labor Day, which is coming up on September the 2nd. We actually in our Season of Peace right now, and it ends September the 2nd. But our last event that we had was on Sunday, which we call a Healing Circle. And but we're looking at maybe moving it to maybe mid-August to end it, because all the schools are going back early now, right. and so on. And so our next Season of Peace will be Thanksgiving to January 1st. And we pick these times because especially in the summer, we know that violence rise. So what we do is we directly engage individuals that are gang involved. We know these individuals that's committing the violence, and ask them during this time to fall back, right? Don't commit violence against each other. And at the same time, what we try to do is have a lot of events in the community to have the whole community engaged, right? So we have a lot of nonviolence conversations. We have town halls. We have panel discussions. We have reform, gun violence prevention, not reforms, forums. We had a OG softball game and it was very successful. We had it in County Park Recreation Center, and it was very successful, and so on. And so we had the healing circle that we had. A mom whose son was killed 3 years ago. So she started an organization, and so she have these healing circles, and so we bring a lot of people there, whoever wants to come and have a healing circle. And so OGs, like a lot of my friends and guys who are even younger, when they come there, they really testify and say that like that really helped them, right? Because the healing circle helps them focus and deal on their trauma. And we know that when we talk about our issues and talk about our trauma, one of the things I always say is trauma fractures us, but telling our stories bring us back together again. And so people feel a lot better after they talked about their issues and share with the group. And so it's a blessing to the mom. It's a lot of moms there that lost their sons or daughters to gun violence and gang violence, and the perpetrators. Like a lot of my friends, I had a couple of friends there that just got out of prison for doing 30-something years, and some of them got out for doing murder. So we bring them all together so we can have this healing, right, among us all. So we have events like that, and then whatever we can think of, right, to engage the community and have the community involved. But the main thing is that we want to, number one, reach out to those individuals that's involved in the violence, because we know that when you talk about gang violence, it's only a small percentage, less than probably 1% that's actually committing the violence, right? So if you can reach those guys and get them to fall back and even help some of those who want to change their life, you can help them change their life, or at least start or get on that path and prevent them from engaging in further violence and so on. So we started the No Shots Fired program along with what we have, the Seasons of Peace, in 2021, in September 2021. And it's with the city, it's a collaboration with the city of San Diego, and the funding actually comes out of the SDPD budget. Yeah. And we did get, because we're lived experience credible messengers, we did get some pushback on that from the community at one time, because they thinking that you're working with the police in the sense of going back, telling on them and giving information, things like that. I think we have to do a lot of education, and I think now they understand that no, PD works in their lane and we works in our lane, and we have a professional understanding with PD of what their role is in this and what our role is, right? And our role is not to snitch, not to give them information or anything like that. Now, we do ask them when there's a shooting to give us information, right? So that we can respond to it and prevent the shooting. So we ask the age, the race, the gang that was involved, both gangs, if there is gang related, the gang member, what gang he was from, if there was another gang involved, what gang was involved, what street did it happen on, the age, race, what hospital the individual went to, so we can respond. We can dispatch teams to the crime scene and to the hospital. We just enter an agreement with UCSD, right? A contract. We are like a vendor with UCSD now, that when there's shootings, now we can reach out to them. We were able to do that before, but I think we made it a lot stronger now as far as the language, as far as us being able to get access to the individuals that got shot. Because when it's gang-related and violent injuries, when an individual go into the hospital, they put them under what they call a trauma code. And that trauma code, so if you go there and say, hey, I'm looking for Cornelius Bowser, they're going to check and say, we don't have a Cornelius Bowser here. So you have to give them the trauma code name. And so we just signed a contract with UCSD where they're going to work with us. And so we'll be able to call them and say, hey, this person got shot. This is where they got shot at. This is the name and so on. And then they'll find them for us. And then we'll be able to have access and go into the hospital and be able to minister to those individuals. Offer wraparound support, because that's the other thing we want to do, is offer wraparound support and so on. So we do hospital interventions also. We started a program last year of January 2023. We started a program, a gun diversion program, because one of the things that we found out, we were getting referrals from SDPD of individuals that were gang members that got arrested for a gun. Because we were like, okay, we can get to these individuals, we can help them, right? And prevent them, number one, from getting arrested, from having a gun and getting arrested again, but also they have the highest potential of getting involved in some type of violence. And so STPD was giving us these referrals, and a lot of the individuals that we were getting were felonies. And we reached out to DA's office and say, hey, can you all work with us, right? That if this individual go through our program, that you all either reduce the charges or whatever, drop the charges or whatever needs to be done as far as some type of diversion. The DA's office wasn't interested in that, and but we asked them to vet all the cases for us because what STPD was giving us wasn't enough information to really determine what was going on. And I'll tell you why. Because when they was giving us the referrals, we would call those individuals or go to their house, and sometimes the charges were already dropped. Sometimes they were already in prison, and some of them were going through the process. And what we were trying to do, the only thing we had to offer at that time is that we'll support you through the court process if you join our program. And this is what our program would offer you, right? But none of them was really interested. But when the DA's office vetted these cases, one of the things that I saw is that some of the cases were redirected to the city attorney's office because I guess it was reduced from a felony to a misdemeanor. And because the city attorney handles the misdemeanors. So we reached out to the city attorney's office and met with them and explained them the same thing we did to the DA's office, that we want to do diversion, with these individuals. And the city attorney's office, they actually told us, like, there's a law that just passed, right, to where that you can actually get the judge to divert the misdemeanor to a program. If they complete the program, they can drop the charges. And I was like, wow. They said, but it's probably best to meet with the public defenders and not us. We'll probably support some of it, but there might be situations that we don't want to support. So if the best way to do this is to go through the public defenders, because they can give you direct access to their clients. And so we met with the public defenders. All of them presented the program to them. We met with the judges that was handling those cases, presented the program to them. And so what they ended up doing, once we did all that, the judges immediately started sending us individuals for the program. And so our gun diversion program, it runs for 12 to 18 months. A lot of times judges make them go the whole 18 months. Some complete the program early. And we've had quite a few now that are starting to graduate from last year. This year they started to graduate that was in the program. And one of the things that we found is that 97% of individuals that have completed our gun diversion program have not been rearrested 6 months after completing, have not been rearrested, and during our program have not been arrested. And so that's a big bonus for the program. Of course, it's still young, so we got to give it 3 or 4 or 5 years to really see how things work. But what the data we've been collecting so far, it looks good and it looks promising as far as with that program. And so we use what we call interactive journaling curriculum. There are 3 foundational theories in the curriculum. That's CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. Then you have motivational interviewing, and then you have the trans-theoretical model of change, which are the 5 stages of change. And so those foundational theories are used in interactive journaling, which is expressive writing, and it helps the individual to think, because how you think leads to how you feel leads to how you behave, and how you behave leads to an outcome. If you want to change the outcome, you have to change how you think. And so that's what the program is centered around. But we also wrap around them support services, whatever else they need. If we need to connect them with another organization, we do that. If they need employment, we connect them with employment. If they need counseling and we can't provide that, we'll offer some type of counseling for them, and so on. So we do provide other different types of services for these individuals during the program. And so that's another program that we do with is the gun diversion program. Excuse me. We're looking right now to work with SBCS, and I believe it's the what do they call it? The San Diego Workforce Partnership, and going into the juvenile halls and working with individuals there. We're working on the language right now to be able to go in there and work with individuals who are either getting ready to get out and or already out, and we start working with those individuals. They help them not only get off probation and so on, because our goal is we don't want them to just be in compliance, right, of what your court order says as far as being on supervision, but we want them to change their behaviors, because they can get off probation and go right back to doing what they do. And so because we're a faith-based organization, even though everyone that works with us is not in faith-based, but because most of us are in the faith-based community, we offer God too. So that's the main objective. We want to see people change their lives, and like me, right? And gang member, and that God saved me and pulled me out of that lifestyle and so on. So that those are some of the programs that we do and that we focus on. So we do violence interruption, like I mentioned earlier. Whenever there's a shooting, even if we don't get the information from PD, because sometimes they may not know if it's gang related or not, we have contacts in the community that lets us know, and we reach out to the family, the victims, family, and the victim if the victim survived. But we also try to reach out to the various gangs that may be at war with each other to get them to fall back, right, and not continue to commit violence against each other. So that's interruption. Prevention is the best piece. Our primary three pillar focus is.
Before, can I ask you a little bit about the intervention?
Yeah.
How's it received by people who are like by the leaders of the gangs? You know, do you guys get pushback from them that you're trying to get our people out from us, or we're not gonna put down our guns? Like, who are you to tell us when we stop? They did this to us. We're not gonna just let it go because you say so.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, how do?
Yeah, you do face those challenges where you'll reach out to an individual, and an individual, him and their homeboys, they're upset, right? They're hot about it, and they're not listening, right? They're not listening, and they're going to go out and commit a violent act against someone else. You do have that at times where they will not listen, where they're going to do what they got to do. And what I tell them is that, like, if you do this, right, you got to think about the consequences, because you will get locked up. You will end up getting caught, especially in San Diego. They have a high rate of solving these homicides and shootings. So if you do this, your likelihood of getting away is slim, right? Especially now, you have smart cameras, you have license plate readers, you have cameras all over the place. And once they get on your trail, that's it. So you got to think about that. So I'll let them know, and I'll tell them about that, right? Yeah. And also, we go to the hospital to the victim, right? There have been times where they don't care, but a lot of times, and that's why we focus on the hospital interventions, is because when an individual gets shot, they're thinking about revenge, but they also think about, I could have lost my life, right? And I've had individuals tell me, I need help. I don't want this to happen again. And I've had individuals tell me, like, I don't want to see nobody else get hurt. Well, now they might be telling me this, but a lot of these individuals we follow when they get out of the hospital. We continue to work with them, I should say, and provide them the support services that they need. And so we're with them, and we're communicating with them. We're talking with them to make sure that they or their homies are not committing any type of violence against each other and so on. And so a lot of times we're able to track it that way or what have you. And I know a lot of times when you're talking about violence intervention and disrupting the violence, a lot of times, I should say maybe law enforcement or people that don't believe in what we're doing, they will say things like, well, you don't know if that person is going to retaliate anyway. I said, well, we can't read nobody's mind, but we know what the probability is, right? And so one of the things that we found out through a study that was done at UCLA is that when you're talking about disrupting the violence and preventing retaliation, when the police responds, now the police plays a huge role in this, right? And you need the community and you need the police, right? If you're going to address gun violence. And when the police are in their lane and they're preventing or trying to disrupt violence when it happened, the study showed at UCLA that when they respond alone, they can reduce that likelihood of retaliation down to about 20%, right? But if you have PD working in their lane and you have violence interrupters working in their lane, separate lanes, you can reduce that retaliation down to less than 1%. And that's what the UCLA study shown and produced. So, and that's the thing that we tell them is that, yeah, we need you, but you need us. Working in our lanes, that professional understanding that what we're doing over here and what you're doing over here are two separate things, but we got the same goal. We want to prevent violence and disrupt it and so on. So when you talk about the violence, disruption, and intervention and so on, yes, a lot of these guys, when the violence happen, if you don't have a relationship with them, if they don't know you and respect you, they for sure not going to listen. But the upper hand that we have in the work that we do, all of us are former gang members, OGs. A lot of these OGs now that help us are still connected in the gangs and connected with their communities. And these guys will listen to them. And so a lot of times we have upper hand because when something happens, we already in right relationship with these guys. If you just had the shot callers or the OGs who are trying to push them to commit violence, if you just had them having that influence on them, then yes, they would just do what the big homie said or whatever and go out there and commit the violence. But now you got a big homie over here that's no longer in that's telling you no, fall back, blah, blah, and this is why. And we want to provide you support services and things like that. And so there is that tussle, right, between the OGs, because you do, and between the leaders or those influenced, those shot callers in the gang, and the work that we're doing, because they going in one direction, we go in another. So a lot of times that's who we reach out to, the shot callers, right? We build relationships with them. We bring them into our program, and we'll pay them to do certain things, right? And so then when I reach out to them, they're going to listen because they're the shot caller, and their homies are going to listen to them. And so that was the whole objective of the Seasons of Peace. When we're talking about getting them to fall back, we identify those guys who are shot callers, those guys who we know have influence over the other guys, and we reach out to them and get them to buy into it, and then they talk to their homies, right? The same way. But you always have somebody who ain't going to listen, want to do their own thing. And then when that happens, what you end up having is, it might take 2 weeks, 2 months, or even a year, but eventually someone is going to get arrested. And the thing, and I use that, right? When that happened, I go on YouTube or Facebook or wherever, and I start talking to them, like, see what happened? You listen to us, those type of things won't happen. Right now, your homie is gone for a long time, right? And the fortunate thing for us is in San Diego is that SDPD and some of the law enforcement agencies like El Cajon, they do a good job in investigating and arresting, right? But that's after the fact, right? But it's a tool that we use, right, to get them to understand, like, you're not in Philadelphia or Chicago, places where the solving the crimes are very low, right? And that's why you have high levels of homicides and gun violence. You're in a city where it used to be 90%, but last time I checked, I think it's in the mid 80s, where the crimes the homicides that they're able to solve each year. And that's a high rate, especially compared to a lot of the other cities and so on. So when you have that high level of homicides being solved, and when you tell them this and they don't listen, and then when they go out there and commit their crime, they get arrested, then we're able to come back and have those conversations. And so that has impact. When there's an arrest, that has impact if we're already doing our job, right? It has an impact, and it makes them start thinking and so on. And so that's one of the reasons why when you look in the city of San Diego and you go back to 2020 when violence really rose, and 2021 when it rose more, and when we started doing this program, as you'll start seeing that each year homicides and gun violence started going down as it relates to gangs.
Yeah, man, that's so interesting. So you guys, you have relationships with all these, and it's interesting how all your work kind of builds on each other, right?
Yes.
Like having these conversations around the Seasons of Peace gives you a reason to reach out to all these, because there's a lot of different gangs in San Diego, right?
Exactly.
So you got to have your hand in a lot of different communities and a lot of different, there's a lot of old hats you got to talk to.
Exactly.
And so you're able to build those relationships, and then later on when something happens, even if it's outside the Seasons of Peace,
right,
you have some foundation to reach out and say, hey, how can we resolve this without having more people get shot, more people go to jail?
Yes. Absolutely. And and one of the things I'll add to that is like I was just talking to, because we have Seasons of Peace planning committee meeting each Wednesday, right? And so we had one yesterday. We debriefed on the meeting on the Healing Circle, started planning and talking about the next season of peace, but also we're going to focus on Halloween because we saw an uptick in violence during Halloween too. So we're going to focus on Halloween, not so much a season of peace, but we're going to do some things during that time. But one of the things that I found in looking at the data is that during from Thanksgiving to January 1st, during the holiday season, far as gun violence, that goes down, right? Now, suicide and things like that goes up, but gun violence, as it relates to gangs, it's lower during that time. Gun violence period is lower during that time. And so one of the things I was sharing with the team yesterday is that, because at first I was thinking about, well, maybe we don't need to have a season of peace during the holiday season. But one of the things that we talked about is, number one, we could start focusing on the suicides, but also we can get that momentum, keep that momentum going, right? So that when we do go into after January 1st, we already got a good momentum going. We're still keeping the dialogue, the conversations going. We're still building these relationships so that we can stay on top of it, right? Because you don't want to let down. And so that's why we're going to do this season of peace during the holiday season, even though violence go down, because it gives us a momentum to continue to have this conversation, continue to reach out to the gentlemen that's involved. So I'm formerly West Coast Crip, and so on my side of town, I reached out to some of the guys that are actively gang involved, right? And I let them take the lead on. Last Thanksgiving we had a turkey giveaway. They came and they were the ones giving out the turkeys and everything. During the Christmas, how they were the ones giving out the toys and things like that. Because what we talked about among the OGs is, one of the important things we need to do is bring those who are involved in the gang activity involved in what we're doing so they can do some positive things versus the negative things and so on. And it makes them feel good and they like it, right? And I remember I was talking with this one youngster, active gang involved and highly respected, probably one of the shot callers. And we was talking about the, I think it was the turkey giveaway. And there was I was talking about, should we do vouchers? Should we do this, do that, to make sure that, the right people are getting the turkeys and things like that. And he said, well, he said, well, I see where you're going. He said, but that's not where we're going. He said, we're doing this out of love. And we just want to help people, so we don't care who gets the turkeys. Yeah. That blew me away, right? I said, "Oh, okay, hey, you got it. You got it." I'm getting political on it, and so that's the kind of a mindset, right? And so I have a group of young men that I work with from my side of town, and we like football season gear to start. We meet every Sunday. We do something. I took these guys fishing. They had never been fishing before, right? And one of them brought their son with them in the whole shebang. They had a good time, caught fish and everything. We go out to eat. We'll meet, like football season here to start, so we'll meet every Sunday. They love the Chargers. Most of them, some of them don't. Yes, yeah, I know I don't, but some of them do. They like the Chargers, but some of them don't though. And they all meet. We have food. We'll watch the game, have a little fun, but then afterwards we'll do a little CBT with them and so on. And so building these relationships with these young men that are actually out there, then that's how you win their respect. And so then not only are they thinking, because their thinking is changing about the things that they're doing, like having a gun and getting arrested with it, or like going out there committing violence. Now they're probably have some ambivalence, right? Feeling two ways at one time. They're at the same time thinking about, I want to do this, but man, I got a new consciousness growing in my mind. Don't do it, right? This is not cool. Focus on your life and family and get yourself together and get out of this and so on. And so I found that to be highly effective. And so we build a template, and we're asking the other OGs to do the same thing with their homies and things like that. And so that's another one of the ways that we actually keep these guys who are actively involved in the gangs engaged, so that when something does happen, I can reach out to them, call them. They're going to pick up the phone and answer. Yeah. Now, if they mad and upset, many times sometimes they won't be honest. They're like, yeah, we ain't going to do nothing and go do something, right? But I'll know, I'll know, and I'll find out, right? And so on. So a lot of times, their mindset has changed. There was this one youngster that I was working with. I was telling about the season of peace and falling back and things like that. He didn't completely agree to it, but he was like, I can do that. He said, but what about the other side? He's like, I might go to the store somewhere else and they see me, then what? And I said, yeah, and that's why we're working on both sides, right? But 2 weeks after that, he got shot. He got shot, and he wouldn't let nobody come to the hospital to see him, but he let me come in because back then it was still kind of like COVID, and you have to show you couldn't go in the hospital unless you've been vaccinated, and or it showed that you had a test and you were cleared, and the patient would have to put your name on their list versus just going into the hospital and going to the floor. And so I had him to put my name on the list to go up to see him. And when I went and saw him, one of the things I said to him was like, "I thought you was gonna stay out of the way, man. Where's you?" And he was like, to him, he said, "I was staying out of the way." He was at Memorial Park when it happened. And so and when I thought about it, I said, yeah, to him, that is staying out of the way. To me, being at home or being somewhere safe versus, just being out in public like that. But to him, that was staying out of the way. He was minding his own business and things. But those are the type of examples I can give you that we're dealing with, real life situations that we're dealing with where everything don't always work perfectly for us. But overall, when you look back, like at the end of the year, and you look back what the work you've done throughout the year, you say, man, we've had impact in this work that we've done. The thing that I would ask of the Mayor Todd Gloria, and SDPD, and maybe they might, I've seen some changes within SDPD since they got the new chief, because when they did this last report about violence going down and so on, Mayor Todd Gloria gave all the credit to SDPD, but SDPD did say that they stakeholders in the community had a role in it too, right? Because you can't forget the community. And many times they forget the community. So one of the things that I would ask of the mayor and SDPD is to acknowledge the work that we're doing and the impact that we're making in the community, right?
Share some of that credit, right? Because
exactly. Even if they don't do it, we're gonna still do the work. But
right.
You can't take all the credit.
Yeah, for sure.
With all the work that we're doing out there, going directly to the individuals as it relates to gangs. Now, all the other crimes, we have nothing to do with that, and police most definitely played a role in that and did that. But when it comes to gang violence, we play a huge role in that.
Yeah. Man, and as I'm listening, our church has been really leaning into better understanding trauma specifically, and we've developed some programming around trauma. And I just a few episodes ago, I had someone on who's an expert in the Bible and moral injury, which is kind of an aspect of trauma, and that is new to me. And what I'm hearing in your story is that you're using all these principles that we've been talking about, like all these things that we've been talking about. This is how it works, right? This is how you heal from this stuff.
Amen.
And you're doing all of that stuff. It's kind of amazing just to see it in practice and to see such a robust system and a ministry with just a faithful group of people that have like this depth of experience, that have like the reputation and the respect of the people who are in the community that are kind of struggling with all these issues. It's inspiring and really wonderful to hear.
Right. And one of the things that I realized versus my time when I was gangbanging and the youngsters I'm dealing with now is that a lot of education is out there, like you just speaking about the pastor, that these youngsters, they're more aware of their trauma, right? When I got in church and then I started working for a union, right? And when people got fired from their job, I would file a grievance, help them get their job back. And there was a lady who got fired, and I was like, okay, what happened? How come you got fired? Why you weren't showing up to work? Why you wasn't able to perform and things like that? And she said she was suffering from PTSD, because of someone had the R word with her and to her. And I said, wow, PTSD. I went to the library and looked it up. Back then, that was like in the early 90s. And so back then, I didn't have access to internet, so I had to go to the library to look it up. Like, what's PTSD? I never heard of the word. And when I started studying it, looking it up, and I was looking at the symptoms and all of that, I was like, that's me. That's what I didn't even realize for years and years I was suffering from trauma and didn't even realize it until I went to the library on that. And then I was able to start dealing with it. But these youngsters today, they're more aware of their trauma, and you can talk to them about their trauma and things like that. But I try to get them to understand, don't use your trauma as an excuse, right? You want to heal from your trauma. You don't want to use that because you're in a fight, flight mode or freeze mode, and you want to get out of that. You want to get in a place where you're not reliving that, and where that you don't get angry when you think about it and all those type of things. But there's a lot of trauma in our community that individuals are doing, and not only they're traumatized, but many of them are being re-traumatized through the things that's going on. They self-medicate on marijuana and liquor and things like that. And I didn't smoke marijuana, but I smoked PCP, most definitely alcoholic drinking and things like that. They do those type of things. I believe also from the youngsters that I'm dealing with is that, and even those that's on probation and getting out, a lot of them do want work. They want employment. They want some decent work to where that they can make a living, right? And so those are things we try to help them with, and help them to have these job skills, require these job skills so that you be work readiness, be prepared when you do get a job and things like that, because that is important. The thing that I challenge individuals on, at least from my lived experience as a gang member, is that when I used to gang bang, I had a job too, but I was still gang banging. So one of the things I try to tell our team and tell others is like, they say, we need jobs, we need jobs. I say, yes, we need jobs, and we can use that as a carrot to bring them in, but you got to understand, you got to change the mindset. If you don't change their mindset, they still going to get caught up even with a job, right? Because their mindset hasn't changed yet.
Well, one of the things that came out, so, and again, I'm kind of new to this language, but with that discussion I had with Dr. Brad Kelly about moral injury, was how moral injury, which is, it's an experience of like having either you have kind of committed some kind of moral failure that has undermined your moral sensibilities, or having that done to you, oftentimes by like an institution or by a group. And I would imagine it's all over gang violence. We see this all over with homelessness. Almost everybody has had some system fail them, or some family betray them. They've had this deep sense of like, things shouldn't be this way. And then what that leads ultimately to is despair, where you just throw your hands up and like, well, if there's no right and wrong, if no one's going to listen to these rules, if I can't be good, if no one's good, then who cares? Whatever. Exactly. I'm going to do whatever. And I feel like that seems, again, I'm just on the beginning of trying to go in that direction in the journey. But that seems so pertinent to what we see on the streets in East Village, and I'm guessing that's what's pertinent to people who are in these gangs. Like, well, who cares? I don't care if I go to prison. I don't care if I die. Like, there's like a despair that's in it. And so part of what you're trying to do, especially through, I'm hearing this with watching football games and going fishing and stuff, is to kind of give people a sense of like, no, there is some goodness in this world, right?
Exactly.
And even allowing people to give out turkeys. That's one of the responses that Brad was suggesting, is that like giving people opportunity to participate in something that's just kind of purely good and generous.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where do you see like the role of despair, and how do you help people overcome that despair?
As you were speaking, the first thing that came to my mind was fragmented systems, right? That's why you have a lot of hopelessness, despair, where people give up because systems have failed. And that goes even to community organizations like ours and other community organizations, because you lack the resource or the capacity to really meet the need. Churches, we don't understand, like you were just saying, don't really understand, because we say, hey, come to church and get the word and get saved, but not really understanding the kind of person that you're dealing with and what they're coming up against. And they might be turned off because the church failed them, right? The schools have failed us, right? Of course, the system has failed us. When you talk about the criminal justice system, when I talked with some of these young men, I was just talking with a young man, I just wrote a letter for him. He goes to court today to be sentenced, I believe. And I wrote a letter for him. But in my conversations with him, one of the things that he said is that, because he's like 20 years old, but he'd been to prison already. He was caught up in the juvenile system. And what he was saying is that he was never given a positive opportunity. He said every time he got caught up in the system, they punished him, right? And that's all he got. He never had any other options. And his mind is just waking up to those ideas because of the relationship that he had with me and the conversations that I've been having with him. I knew him when he was out, and then I really started connecting with him when he got locked up and so on. And now he's realized, man, I never really had that kind of opportunity. If I can get that now, that would be great. You know what I mean? So what ended up happening with a lot of these individuals is that you're looking at their trauma, you're looking at how communities are marginalized and underserved, and you have all these systems that are set up, but are they serving them right? Even the Live Well Center over there, and the county, they have to get on board with understanding the kind of people that they're serving, right? And I can use myself as an example, right? I adopted my great nephew, which I call my grandson, and when we was going through the adoption process, they held everything up because of my criminal record way back in the 80s, right? You know what I mean? And so I had to almost relive everything just to explain those things to them so they don't realize the way they set systems up sometimes. Now it traumatized us, but not only that, but like if a person has a record and this might be recent, they won't even let them help their family members and so on. So even these systems don't clearly and altogether understand how to help our community, how we've been criminalized, how the answer has always been punishment. Lock us up, send us to prison. The prisons don't rehabilitate, right? They just, you come out worse than you were when you went in, right? And so on. So you have these different systems that have failed us. And when you're talking about being marginalized and underserved, things like loans from banks, being able to get banks to help us, being able to own a home, own something to make you feel good about yourself, right? I remember I was, an individual got shot and I went to the hospital and the nurse came in and she was doing some type of evaluation herself, right? And so I was sitting there while she was asking him these questions, right, about certain things. And so she asked him like, have you ever thought about suicide? And he started crying. And this is a man, right? And he had kids. And he started crying and said, yes, I have. And she, so she dived into a little bit of why. He felt like a failure. He felt like, he felt his children, he felt everybody. He didn't have a job. He was homeless, all these different things. And you do get in a place of despair. You start turning to drugs, right? You don't understand your trauma like you should. And so you're not responding rightly because your mind is not right in that. And that gets you caught up in all type of things. And these drugs these days, I have a nephew that got caught up in the drug scene. And his mind is messed up now. And so even when he's not on drugs, he got to take some kind of medication because his mind is messed up. And it's hard to many times even tell with some of the drugs they're taking and what is a real mental health issue versus the drugs that they're taking, behavioral health, mental, whatever we want to call it. But there are some issues there. And so you have all these things compounded to where the individuals don't care. And then when you, like myself and like a lot of these young men we're trying to help, when you know the only way to solve your problem the way you solved it before was through violence, right? Or going to get high or what have you, then that's what you have. And so, yes, there's a lot of hopelessness, a lot of despair where people just don't care. At least that's what they told themselves, right? Until I find that what happens a lot of time, not all the time, but in most cases, when an individual go to prison, they go for a long time. By the time they've done 15 years, maybe 10, but 15 for sure, they start waking up. Right? They start waking up and realizing and dealing with their issues, right? Because now they realize like, man, I really messed up, right? But it's not too late, but man, if we could have got to that person before that, right? And I have a friend that is in prison right now. And he got locked up when we were 17, we're the same age. So that's been like, 40 something years, 44, 40, 45 some years that he's been gone. He can't get out because of his mental health situation. He's on medication. But think about it, if we would have caught that when he was 17, before he did the shootings and things like that, probably could have got the support and the help that he needed to prevent that from happening. And so those are some of the things that I focus on to look at also is that like, 'cause I have friends that have real mental health issues that need to be addressed. And I think when you see people that's homeless and people that's on drugs, either the drugs driven them to a mental health crisis or they already had it, right? And they didn't get the support, fragmented systems failed them. And that's why they're out there like the way they are and so on. And so the system makes it so hard for you to help people. And I'll give you an example. When we started the No Shots Fired program, I wanted to model our program after a program called Advanced Peace, which they find the high-risk individuals that they believe involved in the violence, and they bring them into the program. The carrot that they use to bring them into the program is they offer them a scholarship, and they call them fellows, right? They say, hey, if you come into this program for a year, for 12 months to 18 months, we'll give you $1,500 a month if you're doing the things you're supposed to do, plus a milestone of $1,000 for 9 months for within that 12 months for a 9-month period. So for up to 9 months, they're going to get $2,600, right? And they just have to come to the program, stay out of trouble, things like that. And at the same time, they're going through this mindset change or what have you. We wanted to do that through the No Shots Fired with the city, and they said, our ordinance and charter doesn't allow you to do that. Right, you can't do that. No money can go directly to an individual, and so on. So we got to try to find foundations and so on to do that, right? And so that's been a challenge for us. And many, when I talk about fragmented systems, and when you're talking about even community-based organization, faith-based organization, one of the challenges is having the proper resources. The passion is there, the ability to get out there and do the work is there, but providing those resources to these individuals that need help. What do you do once you catch the fish, right? Once they come in, what do you do? Yes, we can offer a mindset change, but these guys have housing problems. These guys need the utility pay. They probably struggling to find a job. If they have a job, not paying them enough. They need food. They need clothing. All these different things that they need, right? Because they've been trapped and have given up on life, and now they want to give life a chance, and they got a little hope. So we want to help them on that, right? But you need to provide some type of support services for them. And these systems many times won't let you do that.
It's so frustrating. That's the stuff that leads me to despair, because we have people that come through the church and they want to kind of turn their life in a new direction. They're ready to get housed. They're ready to get clean and sober. And then it's like, can you help me? And it's like, well, I can try, but it's going to be real hard to get you into a rehab if you don't have good insurance. It's going to be real hard to get you into housing if you're not willing to go to a shelter and stay there for 6 months. It's going to be real hard to do a lot of these things because the systems just don't make it easy.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
yeah.
It's tough.
And even like I've tried to help people who I had someone who called me and said, hey, you know what? I'm on these drugs, but I want to get off, and I want to get in a program. Couldn't even find a program because they don't have no beds, right? And so now they have this Prop 36 that they want to do to undo Prop 47, which I think is crazy, but they're not going to provide the resources for these individuals, right? If they make it a felony and there's a wobbler, well, okay, if you go to drug program, we'll reduce a misdemeanor, things like that. What's going to end up happening is, and from what we were told, I think it's like they said it's going to pump $26 billion into the prison system, right? Because what's going to end up happening is people are going to start getting locked up again. And so those are the type of things that with challenges we deal, because the little change that you did bring on prison reform and so on, now they're trying to overturn that, right? And we understand, from the perspective that, if there's no accountability, people will take advantage of the system. You have some people that do that, but Prop 47 wasn't designed for that, for people to just take advantage of the system, even though you have some people doing that. And we understood when Prop 47 came into place that we got to find a way to offer resources, right, to these individuals. If they're reducing these crimes to misdemeanors and things like that, and they're not forced to go to drugs treatment, and they're not going to prison or whatever, they're going to be on the streets, right? And so we understand the fact that we got to offer support. But the idea of going back to where we were, mass incarceration, is not the answer, right? We need to offer resources, and that's part of the problem that we have with the system, right? And you have that in marginalized and poor communities because, like you said, rich people, they can afford to send their child into one of these wealthy drug treatment programs or whatever they need or what have you. They can get the help that they need. It's the poor and the marginalized and the underserved that is not getting the support that they need.
Yeah, and it's been frustrating to see, because it's the same with homelessness. It's been frustrating to see how both city, county, state, they just seem to try to punish their way out of problems all the time. And
Exactly.
It's like, that doesn't work. People aren't doing this because they haven't been punished.
Right.
They're punishing themselves, already.
Yeah,
their
exactly.
lives are miserable already. If you're on the street, you are not living a good life. We don't need further punishment for people.
That's right.
We need more ways out. Yeah. Well, I don't want to take too much of your time. Anything that you haven't shared with us that you want to share with us, or a word of hope, or anything that's not a very good question, but tell us something good.
Well, one thing I if this is more like an announcement that I want to share on, watch the History Channel on September 30th, which is a Monday at 7:00 our time, even though it's 10:00 Eastern time where they base the time on. But it's going to be 7:00 Pacific time. Here, watch the History Channel. There's going to be It's called Gangster Chronicles. It's a new series, and they go on the 30th. They're going to have two episodes. One is called Crips, and the other is called Cleveland Mafia. But the one that's called Crips on September 30th, I'm going to be featured in that as an interviewee. They're talking about a Crip gang, and because I'm a former Crip, they're I don't know who else they're interviewing. I know they did interview me, and I'm supposed to be in that episode. So watch that episode. I haven't seen the finished product, so I'm interested in what it's going to look like also, and so on. I would encourage everyone to get involved, right? It seems hopeless sometimes, and it seems like we're fighting a losing battle, but we have wins. As we fight and as we keep on. Yes, you have a lot of failure, but in those failures, we do gain some wins. And as I shared with you, we have some wins. We helped to reduce gun violence down as it relates to gangs in the city of San Diego, and I believe in the region as it relates to some of the gangs that are mobile now, and in places like Nassau City, Chula Vista, El Cajon, and so on. So we have some victories that we have won, and these individuals that are out there involved in this violence are human just like everyone else, and they can be reached, they can be touched. They have someone that they love in their life. They have someone that they care about, right? They have feelings and thoughts, right? And all they need is that love, compassion, and support, right? And to reach out to them. Don't give up. Don't give up. It took me till I was 22 and a half years old. It takes others longer, and it takes some shorter, but you just never know where God is working in somebody's life, right? And especially for us who are of the faith community, we carry the most powerfulest message, and that's God, right? And one of the things that I always pray now and ask God to do is I don't want people to just come in contact with me. I want them to come in contact with the Spirit that lives through me, right? And if the Spirit leads and guides me, to lead me to the right people. And I believe that the key is, and I'm here to use key, but I said key, but I want to use key, is that we have to discover the key to people's hearts. That's the key to helping people, is discovering the key to their heart, and then people will listen, then people will help. And like you said, there are people that want help and support, and we have to be ready to help them the best that we can, and so on. So the fight continues, and I hate to use that word fight, but the work continues, the ministry continues. But in the end, we know that we're getting better, not worse, if we're doing our part. We can make things better, not worse.
And it's also healing for us. Like you said, a lot of times we start hearing description of PTSD or moral injury, and you're like, hey, they're describing me. But getting involved in the work, that's part of our healing process too. So,
exactly. Yeah. So the moral injury, you have that on the podcast too, right?
I got it. Yeah.
I want to go. I want to go look at that myself.
Check it out. Brad Kelly. I'll send you the link to it. It was 2-3 episodes ago, and like I said, I'm gonna try to follow that up and I'm gonna ask Brad, hey, who else should I talk to, because I want to learn more about this.
Absolutely. Much as we can learn. Me too. So absolutely.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a huge blessing to have you join me on the show. I hope that we can continue to talk and find ways to collaborate. And especially because not everybody that we're doing this with is in San Diego, but you're right down the street from us, literally down the same street, right? And we're even on the same street now. We're down Market and Euclid recording this. And blessings to you and your work. You're doing the work of Christ.
Thank you. And whenever you're doing something, invite us, and we'll most definitely, now that I have your contact information, I'll most definitely let you know. And we follow each other on Twitter, so I'll make sure I tag you on Twitter when we're having different things where we can work together and be involved in the various community events we're doing.
All right. Amen. All right. Well, for those listening, we'll catch you next time. Thanks for joining us. And again, thanks to my guest, and we'll see you later. Thank you.
Bless.